Yoshi Nakamoto, and I am a senior account strategist at Think Parallax. We're a sustainability strategy and comms agency. I'm also part of this current conversation as the one who heads up TPX's DEI committee. And Alicia, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Alicia Rains. I use she and her pronouns. I'm the CEO and lead strategist at ADR Consulting Group. We're a business management consulting firm that really leverages concepts around equity and inclusion to teach managers, to teach executives how to create and facilitate and curate transformational workplace cultures for their employees where everyone can feel and experience belongingness.
Awesome. So we just wanted to have this conversation, I think, from both the ESG sustainability side as well as the DEI side. Just speaking on the part of the sustainability industry, it's always been fast-moving industry, lots of change over the years, but especially in the past few months, there have been a lot of shakeups. And I think just connected to that, part of that, but also its own entity, the DEI world has been seeing a good amount of shakeup. And so just appreciate you taking this time to chat through some of the latest in the DEI space and how that does or doesn't overlap with sustainability.
Of course, excited to be here, excited to jump in this conversation.
Awesome. So the first question, this is a bit of a long one, so bear with me. Just looking back at the historical motivations for corporate DEI initiatives, I think two main arguments or camps often rise to the top. And the first is what we could call the business case for DEI. So things like McKinsey's diversity studies, essentially the idea that DEI drives higher financial returns. If you're a company that cares about DEI, then you'll have better performance. The second camp is what we could call the moral case for DEI. So kind of a counter argument that we as a society and as companies should care and invest in DEI initiatives because it's just the right thing to do. So I'm just curious, kind of getting into your mindset where you stand, where you think public sentiment currently stands, both for your clients, for the employees they're trying to attract. Just what are you hearing right now?
Yeah. Well, it depends on what camp you're in, who your clients are, and who you're talking to at any given moment. So a little bit about myself, but I actually come from the education background. And so when thinking about what DEI work looks like in education, folks in that space, I find that I really don't have to convince or make them understand the utility and the validity of DEI work. We understand that it's important to honor the humanity and dignity of people. It's well understood and well regarded. I find that actually when it's folks who are in maybe more so privatized spaces or maybe other spaces where they're not used to talking about or having such people-focused imperatives, that's kind of where this notion of the business case might come up. So that's one thing I noticed. There's an industry focus, but then also this level of positionality and kind of what your role is within a given organization might have implications on your entry point into this conversation. So a CFO, a chief financial officer, might have a very different list of priorities for their business than somebody who's maybe a CHRO, a chief human resource officer, or a CPO, a chief people officer. And so with that being said, that's why I really, I try to remember that it depends on what camp you're in, what position you hold, where your industry is, and how you might approach this conversation about the business case for DEI versus this more moral imperative around DEI. And neither is perfect, actually. So when we think about the business case for DEI, what that typically means is you're helping someone to understand that they benefit from an investment into diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives by thinking about how their organization stands to profit from that investment, how they stand to have more innovative ideas, more creativity, more diversity of thought, more representation that mirrors probably the clientele and the stakeholders that they serve. And all of that is significant because it helps your organization's bottom line. So really, when we think about the business case, it's helping someone understand, hey, invest in DEI programmatically because it'll have these impacts on your bottom line. And some folks might, have thoughts and feelings about why you would have to convince someone of that. But if you are managing a business and you're strictly looking at the P's and L's, the profits and the loss, and what stands to bring you revenue, where to cut costs, where to minimize harm, or not minimize harm, I'm sorry, but minimize risk, then it makes sense. However, there's also this camp called the moral imperative, and it's really just based off of notions around social awareness, being cognizant of things that are happening in our everyday world, understanding that as increasing diverse people or people from diverse backgrounds enter into the workforce, we have more opportunities to not only get to work across difference, but to manage across difference and to understand one another and better work together. And not for nothing, it's just the right thing to do to care about other people. And so for that camp, what I would say is that it's really noble, but also unsustainable to put your resources behind an initiative within a business based off of feelings, based off of sentiment, because today it feels like the right thing to do. But what happens when that right thing to do is right up against, a busy season at work where there are many different deadlines heading your way? And so that once very intriguing opportunity to maybe think about doing a pay equity study falls to the wayside because you have this big fundraiser event that's happening in 2 weeks, and you need to make sure that all your ducks are in a row for that event. So my point is saying, I actually don't think there's perfection in either camp, but more so, we need a little of the business case, we need a little bit of the moral imperative, but actually what we need most is to integrate our priorities, our goals around diversity, equity, and inclusion within the strategic operations of a business to make sure that it's well concretized in the way that we run our business today, tomorrow, and in the future. I know that felt a little long, but neither is perfect, I guess is what I would say.
I see a lot of overlap there with ESG as well. I think just the necessity of having both sides, but also the fact that either one by itself is insufficient. I would also add on the ESG side, I think especially this year and the past few years, we've been seeing the regulatory aspect coming up too. So now there's this legal case, at least on the ESG side, both with SEC regulations coming and also legislation out of the EU. So that's a third component here that we're integrating with the others.
Yeah, makes total sense.
Awesome. So my next question is, now where we sit, it's May of 2023.
Yeah.
We're just over 3 years out from the murder of George Floyd in 2020. And that's really, I think, the spark for a lot of companies in terms of their investment in DEI initiatives, from demands from customers, from employees, really encouraging those investments. So looking 3 years out, I'm just curious, what, in your mind, what did the successful companies in that sense look like, the ones who got in the game 2020 or after?
Yeah, so many things come to mind with this question. I think, even with it being May of 2023, as we're recording this right now, I don't know the date that we'll publish, but tomorrow is actually the anniversary that George Floyd was murdered. There was a moment in time. And I think, even if we think about why specifically this one murder that happened at the hands of police of an unarmed Black man and was recorded and shared widely, but that was actually not the same. That was not the first time something like that happened. So why this particular case in this particular scenario? And it's because it happened at a moment in time where there was so much uncertainty about the livelihood of a predominant society, right? It was no longer, you can turn the news off or you can just act like you didn't see one of these heinous acts of violence is being committed. It was right there in our face, and our lives were forced to slow down in a way where they hadn't been before, where attention was on this particular case for sure. And so when we think about the public outcry and the demands from folks, that we need to see our businesses, our organizations, if they are worthy of our dollar, to actually make commitments towards upending racial injustice as it exists, or learning about where their financial commitments are or divestments even are. That was a moment in time, right? And so if we think about a company or an organization who made any sort of commitments, or maybe that was their first moment to understand why equity, why diversity, why inclusion was significant, a couple of things have happened to that business if that was their starting point. They have understood that after 2020, maybe they jump into action with maybe financial contributions to social justice organizations, or maybe they started off with leadership and development trainings around unconscious bias or introductory sessions like that. I bet you they pretty soon learned that that wasn't enough. Because I remember kind of this cycle of, let's just get into whatever we can get into to prove and to engage but to do something. I felt like that was what most folks are at. Let's just do something. Let's call that level one. But by 2021, level two was okay. Now we're actually being upheld to this standard of accountability by looking back to what we said we'd do a year ago and proving that something shifted, something has changed, and that we understand where our level of accountability is in this work as well. And I would say since that time, since probably the 2021, 2022, what's happened up until this point right here is a lot of ebbs and shifts. And so what has looked like success for an organization who was committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion since 2020, they have had some hits and misses. So that's why I bring up the cadence of kind of what has happened since then. They've had some hits and misses, and maybe they understood or better understood that they need to focus. We can't boil an ocean. That's a saying that's out there. And so when it comes to committing to diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's less about what your peers, what your competitors are doing, but more so what is most authentic to your organization. If we know that if we look at our leadership team and they don't reflect the rest of our organization in terms of the social identities present, then we need to commit to some different programmatic efforts to make that change, right? Or if we know that we have been called out for the ways in which we market our products, and maybe we have some growth areas in that regard, as far as diverse representation, as far as not upholding stereotypes even in our marketing efforts and our communication efforts, then we've made some commitments there. And we might have had to be called out in order to learn that as an opportunity for us, but that's okay. But success looks like, I guess, to answer that question of what success looks like, it looks like taking accountability for the ways in which we've caused harm, the times where we have gotten it wrong, a commitment to continuous learning, and understanding that we need to listen to our stakeholders. So stakeholders might be your clients, stakeholders might be your folks on the entry level, that might be the folks who've been on the job for 20 years, but we have to listen, we can't make assumptions. And then we have to be willing, right, to put our finances, to put our money where our mouths are. I think that's also what a successful organization has looked like thus far, where they can prove and demonstrate that they've actually made commitments via hirings, that they've made commitments via their resources, that they have, maybe have new offices that they've started, new initiatives that they've started, but how we can show that it's not only a matter of talking, but we're actually demonstrating our commitments through our actions. And I feel like you can always trace the power of somebody's actions back to their pocketbook and how their money is mapping up to what they said they would do.
Appreciate those points. And yeah, seeing a lot of overlap with sustainability and ESG work as well, just as far as regardless of the motivations for originally getting into the game, I think the work is the work, and it's really maybe the less sexy, the less flashy moves, as far as you mentioned before, the sustainability of the work.
Yeah.
So what are really the systems and the structures and the governance around where we say the focus areas are and where we're making progress?
I love that you said less sexy, because DEI work is not sexy at all, actually. As much as you might see it in the news, as much as you might think you know what this work is, it's all about change management. And if you think about what a change looks like, taking something, an organization, from a point A to point B, the change is happening in the middle, in between that A to B. And there's nothing but hardship, resistance, time, energy, mistakes. It is not sexy at all, actually. It's grueling, it could be hard, and it's not about the easy, quick, congratulating ourselves for doing a job well done. It's nitty gritty and sometimes thankless work even. But when you know that there's alignment, when you know that you are purpose driven, when you understand your values and you've made those connections, then it's worth it. And so again, back to that question around success, those are the ones who get it right, the ones who are in it for real, I would say.